Tu dis décollage en cabine? Tu nous autorises au décollage. On s'arrête pas.
1700 kilos.
Checklist avant décollage. Terminé. Paré. On est clair.
Attends, on est bien aligné, sinon on va jamais avec le même alignement.
120 seconds. That's all it took for the Concorde to lose its majestic lure. But we need to start at the beginning. What is the Concorde? In the 1960s, there was a race for supremacy in the supersonic transport market. Boeing Engineering with their 2505 supersonic transport, and Tupolev with their Tu-144. The United Kingdom and France signed a treaty to share the costs and risks of its production. But who would design this project of colossal proportions? The aircraft was designed by 4 companies: British Aerospace, Rolls-Royce, Aerospatiale and Snecma. This band of misfits united would bring out the best of British aviation. On January 21, 1976, Concorde made its first commercial flights, with one aircraft departing from London to Bahrain and the other from Paris to Rio de Janeiro via Senegal. The innovative Concordes flew well over the sound barrier, cutting air travel time by more than half. Passengers on board could witness the curvature of the Earth from the aircraft's windows as it cruised at altitudes higher than 50,000 feet. Concorde quickly became a symbol of luxury and prestige. Its ability to fly passengers across the Atlantic Ocean in just 3.5 hours earned it the tagline, "Arrive before you leave." The aircraft catered to an elite group of individuals, offering a level of thrill and luxury that was unmatched. Despite its technological innovations and engineering feats, Concorde faced challenges due to difficult economics and the physical realities of supersonic air travel. The Concorde was not only an engineering marvel, but also an icon of beauty and style. Its sleek and aerodynamic design made it instantly recognizable all over the world. The dominant factor in the design and development of the Concorde was speed. This emphasis on creating enough speed to break the sound barrier affected every aspect of the plane's design, including aerodynamics, propulsion, materials, and stability. Several key decisions were made in the creation of the Concorde, emphasizing areas that set it apart from other aircraft. For example, the Concorde's air intake control units, AICUs, made use of a digital processor, marking the first use of a digital processor to be given full authority control of an essential system in a passenger aircraft.
That's the promise of the Concorde, taking shape at Filton in the Brabazon hangar. The Anglo-French supersonic airliners are pushing ahead towards completion. One here, one in France. They'll be the first faster-than-sound airliners in the world. 1,450 miles an hour, most of the way at 11 miles high. The present estimate, Concorde will give Britain and France a 3-year lead over America.
Concorde's flight deck was operated by 3 crew members: the pilot, the first officer, and the flight engineer. Concorde's streamlined nose resulted in a narrow cockpit. It was particularly small for a passenger airliner, as well as incredibly complex. The space is packed with instruments and panels cover most of the walls and roof. But John was able to make some sense of it for us.
The Concorde was powered by 4 colossal Rolls-Royce or Snecma Olympus 593 turbojet engines. These were Anglo-French collaboration and were equipped with reheat and afterburners, providing the necessary thrust for the supersonic airliner. These massive Olympus 593 engines were a highly developed version of the Bristol Siddeley Olympus, which was initially fitted to the Vulcan bomber and generated 11,000 lbs of thrust. The Concorde's engines, however, provided 18.7 tons, 180 kN of thrust each, with a total of 6,000 lbs of additional thrust per engine. At takeoff from the reheat system, the engines used afterburners to gain additional thrust to reach supersonic speeds. Afterburners mix additional fuel with the exhaust gases from the primary combustion chamber and burn it to achieve more thrust. These afterburners were typically used on supersonic military jets. The Concorde's engines were attached directly to the underside of the wing without engine struts, which was a unique design feature. This design reduced air turbulence and made for a more stable engine. At supersonic speeds, engine struts would have been overstressed and likely to break. In terms of the engine's performance, the pressure recovery achieved by Concorde's engine intakes at Mach 2 cruise gave an intake pressure ratio of 7.3.1. The engines also used a variable geometry exhaust assembly to optimize performance at high speeds. Overall, the Concorde's engines were a crucial component in enabling the iconic supersonic airliner to achieve its remarkable speed and performance. But it was not all success and games for Concorde. Only 14 Concordes entered service, with 7 each for British Airways and Air France. Due to its high-profile features and the sense of exclusivity being a member of the supersonic flight club afforded, ticket sales took off. albeit at quite exorbitant prices. For example, one-way tickets with British Airways from London to Washington Dulles in 1977 cost about the equivalent of $3,200 today. Another main issue of the Concorde was an aging fleet with high maintenance costs, which contributed to its economic inefficiency. As if it could not get any worse, the high running cost and low utilization of the Concorde were significant problems. High maintenance costs and huge fuel costs contributed to its high running cost. By the end of the 1990s, given fuel and maintenance costs, as well as limitations to the route, the aircraft's fate was effectively sealed. The fleet aged, and maintenance was extremely costly. Even still, the Concorde would be hit even worse. Its fleet aged terribly, with no new models to replace the old ones. But still, even with these flaws, the Concorde was still popular enough to keep it on shelves. Well, that was until one fateful day on July 25th, 2001.
Expected approach ILS. Landing runway 27 right and 26 left. Take off runway 27 left and 26 right. Expect departure 1 Alpha, 1 Bravo, 1 Yankee.
Comme ça, je vais faire un rolling.
Négligeable, central, 54%. Réchaud, prise,
Quadrille blanche. Qu'as-tu dit? Décollage en cabine? Il nous a autorisé au décollage. On s'arrête pas.
1700 kg.
Checklist avant décollage est terminé. Paré. On est clair.
Attends, bien aligné, sinon voilà, on va dire. Jamais avec le même à 10 degrés.
Slide direct horaire. OK pour la réduction.
Obstacle ahead. Obstacle ahead. Obstacle ahead. Full up. Terrain. Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead. Pull
Yes,
up.
sir.
Too low. Terrain.
Two minutes is all it took for the Concorde to lose its majestic aura. This was the only fatal incident during the 27-year operational history. But I know you're asking yourself, why? Why did this happen? This should have been impossible. The runway was cleared before takeoff. The ground crew did all they could. Even the pilots and flight engineers did their best. It took months and many hours of investigating, but the truth would come from an unlikely source. And that source is closer than you may think. This is not the L-1011 TriStar. This is the McDonnell Douglas DC-10, the L-1011's half-brother. This is a wide-body tri-J airliner that was first introduced in the 1970s. Its competition was the Boeing 747. The DC-10 was produced in several variants, including the DC-1010, DC-1030, and DC-1040. The DC-1010 was the first model to be introduced and was designed for short to medium-range flights. In 1971, the shortened DC-10 version with two engines was proposed as a competitor to the Airbus A300. But McDonnell Douglas decided not to give the proposed twin the go-ahead, as no US airline had wanted one. The DC-10 performed its maiden flight on August 29, 1970, and American Airlines introduced the DC-1010 on August 5, 1971, becoming the largest operator of the type. Now you might be asking yourself, what do these two events have in common? Well, it just so happens before the Concorde took off, a Continental Airlines DC-10 had a part of its engine detached from the plane. And it just so happens that Concorde's tires were punctured by the metal and led to the engine fire occurring. The crash was attributed to a chain of events that began with the Concorde running over said debris on the runway, causing the tire to explode and disintegrate. This led to the aircraft's inability to climb higher than about 200 feet, and about 90 seconds after takeoff, the other left side engine failed. The additional weight of extra fuel and luggage shifted the aircraft's center of gravity beyond the safe operating limit as well. The pilots were unable to control the aircraft, and it ultimately crashed into a small hotel and restaurant in suburban Gonesse, resulting in the loss of all individuals on board and 4 individuals on the ground. But the story still does not end here. In 2010, a French court ruled that Continental Airlines and one of its mechanics were guilty of involuntary manslaughter for their involvement in the accident. The mechanic soldier, John Taylor, was sentenced to 15 months in prison, and Continental Airlines was fined €200,000 to be paid to the families of the victims. However, in a subsequent legal development, a French appeals court overturned the criminal convictions against Continental Airlines, absolving the airline of criminal wrongdoing, but upholding a lower court's order for the company to pay civil damages of €1 million to Air France to compensate for damage to its image. Combine that with the 9/11 attacks restricting air travel, it seems the Concorde was doomed to fail, so even after all this, nobody got a happy ending in this story. Everyone lost in this story. The story of Alpha Charlie is a short one, but one that we must mention, as it is important to this story as a whole. Being registered on 3rd April 1974 to the British Aircraft Corporation. Gol, Bravo, Oscar, Alpha Charlie was one of the most important members of the Concorde fleet. Alpha Charlie's production was given in December 1969. Originally, it was being used as a test bed for the Concorde's air conditioning system checks, as well as auto landing trails. Being a British Airways aircraft, it mostly flew routes out of Bahrain, but Singapore routes were also possible. Alpha Charlie was given back to BAC in 1976 after completing 141 flights, so it could be made a fully operational aircraft. Charlie would finally join the UK fleet on the 13th of February, 1976, even though Charlie was the second Concorde to join the fleet. She was the main and primary representation of the UK Concorde fleet. On the 1st of September 1975, Alpha Charlie flew 4 Atlantic crossings in one day, making a record as the first aircraft to do so. Alpha Charlie then became the first Concorde to land in the US at Washington Dulles Airport on 24 May 1976, but the records would not end here. On 19 December 1985, Charlie traveled at 1,488 miles per hour. This was the highest recorded ground speed for a commercial airliner, Concorde or not. But Alpha Charlie was not the only famous Concorde to break records. Concorde FBVFA, also given the name Alpha Fox, was another iconic supersonic passenger aircraft produced by Aerospatiale and British Aircraft Corporation. Alpha Fox made its maiden flight on March 2nd, 1973. Being one of the initial prototypes like Alpha Charlie, it was used as a test bed to test the Concorde to its limits. Alpha Fox would set a record for flying around the world in 41 hours and 27 minutes in 1988. But Alpha Fox had a sad ending. Alpha Fox was the Concorde that lost everything in July 2000. Alpha Fox was the first Concorde to crash. But this is not the end of Concorde. It would make one final flight to show its power and prestige. Now, after hearing all of that, you might expect me to say the Concorde is a failure and we should forget about it. But no, it's quite the opposite. The idea of supersonic travel still exists in the minds of many people. Many engineers now believe we have the best chance of doing Concorde justice this time. Perhaps using new engine tech that can be efficient and powerful, using hydrogen cells as a primary candidate, could we finally see the Concorde rise from the ashes? There is a market for this type of transport. Who knows, maybe there might finally be an affordable supersonic transport aircraft everyone can fly on. Even if the Concorde is the only successful use of this in the commercial world, there is definitely potential there. And with Boom Overture getting closer to achieving this goal with their XB-1, who knows what else they could do. But in the end, as we soar into the future, the world of aviation stands at a remarkable crossroads, and the Concorde had only widened the possibilities, from the pioneering flights of across the Atlantic to the cutting-edge accomplishments it has done through the years. We must never forget about the impact the Concorde had. Though the Concorde no longer graces our skies, its spirit continues to inspire. In our pursuit of speed, we are reminded that every great achievement begins with a dream, even if that dream seems outlandish.
Here's the reverse thrust coming through the studio.
So what is it? Sadness? A feeling of pride? Sadness? What is the mixture of emotions?
Sadness for me, predominantly. Pride that the airplane has achieved so much in its commercial life, and it's demonstrated that supersonic flight is doable and that there are huge benefits to supersonic flight. And I'm sure there will be a success of the Concorde at some stage.
I had the misfortune of being the BBC's Paris correspondent when Concorde crashed and I went out to Gonesse that evening. And there was a feeling then that would Concorde ever fly again? Did you think it was right to make all the investment in the aircraft to bring it back for what has been a relatively short period of time?
I'll tell you what I do think very strongly indeed. I don't believe